Welcome back. In this session, we will introduce the Integrated Sustainable Waste Management Framework and show how physical elements complement and interact with governance aspects such as stakeholder inclusivity or economics. At the end of this session, you should be able to understand and explain the Integrated Sustainable Waste Management Framework, be able to give examples of the different stakeholders in solid waste management, give examples of stakeholder roles and responsibilities. Waste management requires a complex interaction of many different stakeholders, be these individuals, enterprises, organizations, and institutions. These stakeholders interact, use, and manage technologies to handle waste. The term integrated solid waste management refers to an integration not only of the technical and physical elements of solid waste management throughout the solid waste management chain, but also the integration of socio-economic, institutional, and legal aspects, as well as the inclusion, coordination, and collaboration among the various stakeholders. Students can outline the structure the SWM system following the ISWM and identify stakeholders and respective roles. The goal is to move the fundamental thinking away from a waste disposal to a waste management, and from a waste to resources, hence the updated terminology, waste and resource management, and resource management, as part of the circular economy. By 2050, the world is expected to generate 3.40 billion tons of waste annually. Too often, the environment also pays a high price. In 2016, the world generated 242 million tons of plastic waste, 12% of all municipal solid waste. Plastic waste is choking our oceans, yet our consumption of plastics is only increasing. Cities and countries are rapidly developing without adequate systems in place to manage the changing waste composition of citizens. Meanwhile, an estimated 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide, equivalent to CO2 equivalent to greenhouse gas emissions were generated from solid waste management in 2016. This is about 5% of global emissions. Without improvements in the sector, solid waste-related emissions are anticipated to increase to 2.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent by 2050. More than 80 countries committed to reduce emissions through the historic 2017 Paris Agreement. Improving waste management is one way of contributing to this effort. Solid waste management is a critical, yet often overlooked, piece for planning sustainable, healthy, and inclusive cities and communities for all. However, waste management can be the single highest budget item for many local administrations. Municipalities in low-income countries are spending about 20% of their budgets on waste management, on average, yet over 90% of waste in low-income countries is still openly dumped or burned. As these cities and countries grow rapidly, they desperately need systems to manage their growing waste and mechanisms to pay for the essential services that keep their citizens healthy and their communities clean. We need cities and countries to plan holistically and manage our precious resources better than we have in the past. Building on water waste, a global review of solid waste management from 2012, this report highlights the overwhelming cost of waste management and the need for solutions. This report shows what governments around the world have done to manage their solid waste and highlights the latest trends across income levels and geographies. Using the rich findings and data from this report, we urge stakeholders to think ahead and to integrate waste management into their paradigm of economic growth and innovation. It is the responsibility of every citizen, government, business, city, and country to create the healthy, inclusive, and livable shared world that we strive for. Developing a waste management system is complex. On one hand, it relies on infrastructure, equipment to manage the waste through the waste management chain. Starting with generation and storage at the point of generation, thereafter a service of collection and transport which delivers to a treatment or recovery facility or to final disposal. All these functional steps in waste management will vary in type and scale depending on the local context. when considering waste as a resource, all the steps will further interact with physical infrastructure and equipment that allows extraction and recycling of resources. The different steps in the solid waste management chain are driven by overarching objectives: collection and transport to ensure public health, treatment and/or disposal to protect the environment, reduce, reuse and recycle for the value of the resources. On the other hand, the physical elements are embedded in a governance structure. The principles of good governance in SWM ensure that all the stakeholders are involved and included. Another principle is that of equity, where all, independent of economic status and background, have the right to solid waste service. So that the system in place can be kept running, it must be designed and governed to be cost-effective, affordable, and well-financed. And finally, the system must be embedded and supported by sound institutions, including both the national policy framework and local institutions. Putting this all together results in the ISWM framework, which is embedded in a specific background and driven by waste-related data. Here are some examples of stakeholders and their possible roles in the solid waste management system. Waste generators are always a key stakeholder. They provide the waste and need to interact or interface with a solid waste management service, as they will need to make their waste available for collection. They might also segregate their waste or practice some form of recycling, and last but not least, they will pay for this service. Another example is the informal and formal enterprises, companies and individuals working in and for the waste management sector. They may provide certain services such as collection or recycling. Several companies may be even mandated by the authorities to conduct specific services. Another stakeholder, for example, are NGOs in the city, which are very close to the users of the service and may have the role of creating awareness, but also monitoring performance and influencing certain policy developments. Then, there is the example of the local government authorities. For instance, the city's waste management department or the respective section of the municipality. These are key stakeholders that always have the main responsibility to ensure the service as a public good to all residents. In some cases, they may also be service providers, while in other cases they may mandate the task to others for service provision. For instance, collection to the private sector, be that formal or informal. One aspect typically covered by the local authorities is the interaction with the residents, citizens and beneficiaries of this service. This may take the form of raising awareness, maybe together with the help of the local NGOs. But also enabling inclusion, participation and coordination among stakeholders. Besides the local authority, there is also the role and stakeholder of national government authority. They may not be involved in certain service provision, but rather have a role to play in national strategy and policy development. Finally, the example of international support agencies or development banks as stakeholders. They provide grants or loans, but may also play a role in policy and strategy development in a city or even country. Remember, this list of stakeholders is just an example of the variety generally involved. In most cases, there are significantly more and other relevant stakeholders. It is important to remember that in each context and situation, what is needed is a careful analysis of stakeholders, assessing their views, interests, and influences so they can ideally be included in the process of solid waste management. Be consulted on their views, needs, and demands, but also take ownership of their respective roles to contribute to a well-functioning solid waste management system. We just reached the end of the session. Here are the important elements to remember. We have seen the ISWM framework and its interlinkage between physical and governance elements, and the wide range of stakeholders involved with different interests and responsibilities. As always, do not forget to go through additional resources of the course. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.